Yes, we're recording already, yes.
Okay. Am I sitting just right for you?
You are perfect,
For
yes.
the paint,
yes,
for
yes.
the painting?
Uh-huh.
Okay. My name is Dora Eiger Zaidenweber. I was born and raised in Poland. I was born on January 24th, 1924, in the city of Radom, spelled R-A-D-O-M. Radom is located in the center of Poland, about 60 miles south of Warsaw. My family consisted of, my immediate family consisted of parents, a brother David, he's no longer alive, and he was we were very close in age. He was only 15 months older than I. So there were the four of us. We were a part of a much larger family between both my parents. There were 10 siblings, and David and I had 10 cousins. The entire family, other than the four of us and one uncle, all others perished. I was growing up in a middle-class family, which was very Jewish, very traditionally Jewish. David and I attended school. I attended a Jewish school, and David did for some of the time, but not later. My father was a professional person, and he made a nice living. So we had a very, very comfortable existence growing up. When the war broke out on September 1st, I was 15 years old. At the time, I had just returned from a summer camp, and the invasion on September 1st was pretty much unexpected from our point of view. So I returned from the summer camp to just about start getting ready for school. School was to start right after that weekend. For me, actually on Sunday. But schools never opened because on Friday, September 1st, German armies entered Poland from the west, and that was the end of our education for the time being.
So tell me, what's the information that you had that you say that was very unexpected? Because the news that you have, international news, how the politics internationally, how much access did you have from at that time?
Well, it was, of course, a turbulent time. We knew what was going on in Germany and what was going on in Spain and in the world, but and the demands that Germany was posing to Poland, but that still doesn't mean that there was at a length of time when war was declared and the armies marched in. What was going on in Germany at that time was interesting, that we lived in Europe. Europe was supposedly a civilized place. Nobody was thinking of of what might come. What was happening in Germany didn't happen to us, and we didn't expect it to happen. What was happening was, for instance, in 1938, when Germany was already persecuting its Jewish population, there was no such thing in the offing for the Jews of Poland. I do remember that Jews in Germany who did not have German citizenship were arrested in the middle of the night and deposited on the Polish border. And that at that time, the people, that the German Jews who were on the border, practically without clothes, and it was winter, they were helped by our local Jewish population, and I know that we took in a woman with 4 children whose husband was arrested and sent to Dachau. They lived with us for a few months until the community was able to situate them on their own. I don't know what happened after that, because while they lived with us, we knew them, but when they moved away, then we lost track of them. What happened to them during the war, I don't know. But that was at least a year before. But the bottom line is that at no time in those years could anybody expect what was to come, because we lived in what we thought was a civilized continent, a civilized society. People who didn't kill other people because they were different. We really lived by rumors. And what the rumors did for us, if we wanted to believe it, or whether we wanted to believe it or not. The Germans, since they were at the time winning the war, obviously they were on the run. Mm-hmm. But we didn't. So we thought they were lying, because it went so fast. And now that Britain and France had entered the war, we hoped, we believed that it will be a short war, and Germany would be defeated. You try to be hopeful against all hope. Mm-hmm. So in the meantime, other measures were being instituted. Eventually, we had the Jews were ordered to have an armband identifying them as Jews. Some of the other people in other countries had experienced this too, but they were not the same kind. I think in the Western countries, such as Germany, Austria, maybe Czechoslovakia, or wherever, Holland, France later, those were stars of David, a 6-pronged star, a yellow star.
All right, so I'm listening.
Okay, in the ghetto, then things settled down. The Germans were very firmly entrenched in their occupation. They were not now, of course, now they attacked the Soviet Union and were very busy fighting, progressing towards Moscow and St. Petersburg, or Leningrad at the time. So, but also things in the ghettos settled down too. We still didn't know exactly what was going on, except for the whatever people could hear or see in the dispatches from Germany. And then there was another registration at the end of 41. No, at the end, now that's 41. I'm trying to figure out where I am. In 41, for everybody to get a job, to work in the German war effort. I personally did not work. Women were not required to work. But it seemed it would have been better to have some kind of a job, even for women. And some needed them. Some needed the job to get the whatever pay they could get, because there were widespread poverty and widespread sickness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then came 1942. And early in 1942, things were getting much, much worse. The conditions for Jews were getting much worse. Actually, the Poles didn't fare much better, but a little better. And then on April 28th of 1942, we awoke, we meaning my family, awoke in our little apartment. What we heard, there were of course curfew hours. We could not go out at night. A volley of machine gun fire that sounded very, very close. It so happens that our little place was at the very edge of the ghetto, the large ghetto.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the shooting was coming from inside the ghetto, not outside. We were close to the outside of it. And then there was the knock on our door, and a German order to open the door. My brother was the first one to make it to the door to open it, and out there stood a uniformed German with the insignia of the Gestapo. The Gestapo, you know what the Gestapo was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the Gestapo man asked for my father by name. My father was not well at the time. He had an inflammation of the sciatic nerve. He got out of bed. He was told to identify himself and then get dressed. He asked if he could take a cane with him. He was walking with a cane. The German told him that he could, and he was told to come with him. All the while this was happening, the machine guns were going, so it wasn't just he that was being arrested. Obviously, there were other people. At that evening, we found out that they were loaded on a train, the some 100 men, and sent away. And again, they were sent to Auschwitz, whatever that was or wherever that was, which was not known with any certainty, just a name, but what was going on, judging by the way that they were beaten up, that they were interrogated by the Gestapo, you could imagine that Auschwitz was not a pleasant place to be. And so one night in August, that's about 4 months after my father was arrested, at night, the SS came down into the ghetto, the small ghetto, and they were, while they were rounding up the people in the middle of the night, they were killing an awful lot of, just shooting. So it was a little suspicious as to how they're taking him out into the fresh air, out in the open. Obviously, there was something very, very bad going on, to say the least. Among those from the large ghetto, it was just one section of the ghetto that they rounded up on that occasion. They were all my relatives. We were at the other end of the ghetto, my family, my immediate family. But my extended family, I had a great-grandmother, a grandmother, I had aunts, uncles, and cousins. They were all in that 2,000 that they rounded up in the large ghetto. And then about 10 days later, the same thing happened with the large ghetto. And at the end, it was what was left was about 3,000 people from the almost 30,000 of the Radom ghetto. That was the end of it, and there were only 3,000 left. So we are here in Radom, and we know something is going on. We don't know what, and we don't know what they will do with us. We knew the Germans were running, but why would they leave us alive? There was a great deal of fear and a great deal of apprehension about what was going to happen. And one day, while the Soviet troops are still on the eastern bank of the river, we are lined up in our small camp and marched out of the camp, of the concentration camp, Radom. We marched for 3 days, all westward. Some people were trying to make a run for it. It was July, the weather was beautiful, balmy, sunny. There was a forest to the right as we were marching, and fields of grain to the left. And some young men were trying to run, and they were gunned down with machine guns. And then we got to a place, to a town, where we were kept for a week. The men and the women were separated. We couldn't see each other or talk to each other.
You remember the name of the town? Remember the name of the town?
Yeah, Tomashov.
Tomashov.
And after a week in Tomashov, where we were kept I think the women were in a attic of the local jail, and the men were someplace in a warehouse. We never saw them again until after the war, so didn't know. A week later, the train came, and we were loaded to the boxcars, and on an overnight trip, we arrived early in the morning in what looked like a large concentration camp. The giveaway of what that was the smell. A smell of burning flesh. Have you ever had that? Have you?
I don't think so.
No? no, we hadn't either. That was Auschwitz. So here we were now knowing what is happening in Auschwitz. And there were 5 chimneys. And they were spewing ashes and fire. And so we were in Auschwitz for 6 months. So on the 18th of January 1945, so all I know for sure, when we were standing on the 18th to march out of the camp, so this was the last transport that left Auschwitz on the 18th. We marched, it was winter, so the conditions are much different than they had been 6 months before in July. It was cold, it was snow, it was ice, and it was hunger. We were very hungry. Those were years now of malnutrition and hunger. We marched again for 3 days, and there were even many more casualties because people were giving up. They couldn't walk anymore, and they were giving up. That evening we arrived at our destination, which was, as turned out, it was a camp called Bergen-Belsen. In January of 1945, and the camp was liberated on April 15th of 1945 by British troops. That in that time, half of the 70,000 died. Not by being shot, not by being gassed, but by being starved to death and by having an incredible, what's the word?
Okay.
An epidemic of spotted typhus. When the British came in on the 15th of April, they found thousands upon thousands of dead bodies lying all over the grounds like wood, because there were not enough people, not well enough people to bury them. It was later, when they captured the guards, that they bulldozed a trench or trenches where the bodies were burned, not burned, but buried in those trenches. Mm-hmm. After the liberation, another 8,000 people died. After being liberated, they were beyond saving. And the British did a very good effort. They brought in medics, they gave us food, but it was very, very iffy about whether anybody's going to survive. I came down with the disease, spotted typhus. I guess you might say I was lucky that I survived. That was the end of the road. Mm-hmm. And there were some of us who were lucky to be still alive. Mm-hmm. Well, I spent 60 years talking to groups at colleges and universities and high schools and organizations, traveling all over the state and some other the states around here. Yeah, that was a mission with me. I had to speak for those who couldn't. It's not necessarily my story. My story is secondary to the whole story.
Hmm.